Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting your favourite podcast and becoming a patron, please check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. There's currently over 236 patrons who are supporting the mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media. Take action now and become one of them. All patrons will get their name on a dedicated patrons page on the Tough Girl website, and all female patrons $5 and above are invited to come and join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. I just want to take a moment to say a massive thank you to the following patrons: Deborah Holt, Tara Geiger, Sarah Bright, Zoe Langley-Watham, Katja Lunaire, Ray Red, Kat Benger, Shauna Fallon, Catherine DeFrere, Rochelle Olsen, and Damiana Day. Thank you so much for your continued financial support every single month. It really does make a massive amount of difference, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Today, I'm absolutely delighted that we're going to be speaking to adventurer and journalist Alice Morrison, who will be sharing more about racing in the Tour d'Afrique, riding a bike from Cairo to Cape Town, doing a world-first trek from the highest point of North Africa to the Atlantic Ocean, and running in the Marathon Des Sables, even though she'd never run a marathon before. Enjoy. So Alice Morrison, welcome to the Tough Girl podcast. I am so excited to have you here to share more about your life of journalism and adventure and the different books that you've written and different challenges that you've done. But Alice, I'd love for you to tell everybody just a little bit more about you.
Well, thank you very much for having me on this wonderful podcast. My name is Alice Morrison. I'm a Scottish adventurer based in Morocco at the moment. I speak lots of different languages, and I actually had a bit of a strange route to adventure because I had a career in journalism, and then I became a chief executive. So I was all fancy suits, nice car, nice house in the Peak District in England. And then my company folded, I was made redundant. And instead of taking that as the end of my life, if you like, I took it as the beginning. And I set off and joined the longest bike race on earth, the Tour d'Afrique, and that is AFRIQUE, not FREAK, and cycled from Cairo to Cape Town. And that really launched me on life as an adventurer. And I've managed to make it actually into a life to earn my money, small as it is, but still to survive on adventuring and writing and doing TV and doing freelance journalism about it.
Oh, it's so fantastic. Do you know what? There are so many things that I want to talk to you about. Like your website is amazing, the different challenges that you've done. But let's go back to childhood and growing up. Were you adventurous? Were you outdoorsy?
Well, interestingly, I guess my adventuring is in the blood because when I was 6 weeks old, I'd just been born, my parents, Jim and Freddie Morrison, set off on a ship from Portsmouth, to Uganda, and took up jobs as teachers in basically the African bush. We were in the foothills of the Ruwenzori Mountains, the Mountains of the Moon. So my childhood was spent running around, dodging scorpions and snakes and living the life of adventure. And it's really down to my parents.
Oh, wow. And is this where like sort of the languages that you speak come from?
I think it must do, because I was brought up bilingual in Swahili, which unfortunately I've forgotten almost entirely. But I think when you're brought up in that kind of atmosphere, when people are speaking different languages and you learn one early, you become less worried about it, scared about it. And you just have a tendency to dive in rather than, I think, having that British reserve where you're like, oh, I don't want to say a sentence. Instead, in case I've said it wrong. I've said so many things wrong. I once told a delightful French couple who befriended me on a cycling trip in a restaurant in France. They asked me about my family and I said, oh, my dad is a fisherman and he smokes a pipe. Unfortunately, he smokes a pipe in French means he gives blowjobs.
Oh! I don't really know where to go from that.
I know, it's the hazards of speaking a foreign language badly, but always having a go.
No, good for you. Always have a go. I mean, even if you don't get it right, you'll always get like a good story out of it, which will be funny.
Exactly.
So growing up, I mean, obviously having an adventurous childhood, I always think that could go one of two ways. You can either love it and be like, yes, I want to continue, being outdoors, being in nature, doing these adventures. Or you could almost do the reverse and think, actually, I want some stability. I want some normality in your life. When you continued growing up, did you follow the traditional route? Did you go on to university, or did you go straight into journalism? What was the career path that you ended up taking?
I think I did a bit of both, really, and I think in many ways I am most ways I am pretty normal. I went to boarding school when I was 11 because my parents were in Ghana in Africa, and there were no schools around, and they wanted me to have an education. So I went to boarding school at 11, and that was a bit of a shock, coming to Edinburgh to St Denis and Cranley Academy for Young Ladies and having to wear a green velour hat and ankle socks. It was all a bit strange. But I adapted very quickly. I had friends there. I really enjoyed it. And then I left school early. I left at 17 and went to work in Dubai. My parents were living there by that time, and got my first job in journalism on a magazine called What's On Dubai. And I was so lucky to have that opportunity because it was a startup. It was on the second issue. And I started working there at 17, not knowing anything. And I did everything. I was writing articles, I was doing the accounts, I was making up the pages. So I think that was very fortuitous. But I did leave at 18. I went to university where I studied Arabic and Turkish. And then I did follow a kind of normal path. I mean, I went to Egypt for 2 years to perfect my Arabic. Then I came back. And I went into journalism, magazines, and then TV news. I worked for the BBC, Sky, all sorts of places, but ended up working for the BBC News Channel as an editor, a strand editor, a decent position. Moved on into the internet, and then moved on to become chief executive of a media development company. So I did live that normal life. I lived in London, I lived in Manchester. And then what I found happened for me, and I wonder if this happens for lots of different people, is I was happy. I was enjoying myself. I had wonderful friends. I had a wonderful life. But all my holidays and my weekends were spent doing things outdoors. On my holidays, I would spend, the equivalent of a 5-star 3-week stay in Thailand. I would spend to go and sleep in a tent in Patagonia and cycle across the desert. So I think it was always something at the back of my mind that I found a lot of fulfillment in challenges and in being outdoors and in seeing different parts of the world.
Yeah, 100%. So what was that like then actually when you were CEO living in the Peak District, and then suddenly the business folded and you were made redundant? Because that's a big life change happening right there and then. And there's a number of different directions that you could have, I assume that you could have gone into. Why did you decide that you wanted to make quite a big change and become an adventurer?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about a company folding and people losing their jobs is that I was the CEO, so I was actually responsible for my staff. And that's a terrible thing because you are responsible for other people's livelihoods. And it was a very dark time. I felt terribly guilty. I felt terribly responsible. I tried to do my absolute best, and I hope I did a decent job. But in the end, it is what it is. So that side of it was extremely traumatic. And I still feel for those staff who lost their jobs, because it is, anyone who's lost their job knows it really attacks your self-confidence. And it attacks you in that you don't have any money, and you may well have people depending on you for money, and you certainly are depending on yourself. So what do you do? So I think that side of it was extremely traumatic and difficult. And I'd built the company up for 10 years. So that it was, I was killing my own baby kind of thing. It was horrible. On the other side, it actually liberated me completely because I'd had all this responsibility. Of course, being a CEO is lovely in lots of ways, but it is also a huge responsibility. And suddenly I was liberated from it. And I was quite traumatized. And I'd been told about this race across Africa on a bike, and I loved biking. And I just thought, I want to do that. I've got enough money at the moment. I just want to do it. I want to rediscover the continent I was brought up in. At the most basic level, which is on 2 wheels, day by day, every single day you're connected to the earth and to the sky, and you've got time to stop and talk to people. And I can see that whole continent is going to be amazing. So I took that very negative, and the negatives remain, and turned it into a positive. And what I didn't know at that time was this was going to be my first real step towards a full-time life doing the thing I love.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So first real step, how long did you have to train and prepare before heading out to Cairo?
Oh, Sarah. Sarah. Training and preparation, 2 words, almost unknown in my vocabulary, sadly. So I signed up in November, and it started on January the 9th. And it was one of the coldest winters. So we were ice and snowbound. So my training for cycling 8,000 miles across Africa was sitting on a turbo in front of Strictly Come Dancing.
Ooh, probably with a glass of wine in one hand.
Well, a bar of chocolate, certainly. So my training was terrible and I suffered horribly at the beginning. The first leg was through Egypt, which was relatively flat and relatively cool. And some of it was on road. A lot of it was on road at the beginning. So actually that was an easy-ish beginning. But, you know, when I say easy, it wasn't really. And we had to cycle in a peloton to get them to not be disqualified at the end of the day because of the time limits. And it was my first experience of cycling in a peloton, and I found it crucifying. Because you can't cycle at your own speed, you're cycling at the speed of the group. On the one hand, it really helps you in terms of effort. On the other hand, you have to keep up. And so mentally and physically, it was the most enormous strain. So my advice to you all, do train. Don't do what I do. Train. It's better.
So just explain the race a little bit more then. So how does it work? Like, how many people are doing it? What sort of distances? Are you carrying the stuff on your bike, so you're bike packing, or are there support vehicles? Is it supported, unsupported? What's happening with regards to food and accommodation? Let's get into the nitty gritty.
Well, this is a fantastic race. And to be honest, I would recommend it to anyone. It is completely life-changing. It's the most incredible way to see Africa safely and on your bike. And it's such an enormous challenge on every level that you cannot come out of it unchanged for the better. So that is my plug. I loved it. It's called the Tour d'Afrique, and it's tda.com, I think, online. TDA Tour d'Afrique. Anyway, it's very simple. So in my year, 63, which was 2011, 63 people did it, 11 women and 52 men, the whole race. You can also do stages of the race. So people did join us for one stage, and a stage is usually a country, or half of one country and half of another. Every single day it's fully supported. So all you need on your back is your day bag with your spares, clothing and food, and some food, but every day you're also fed. So there was a lunch truck, and that usually marked about the halfway point. So that would go ahead. When you found the lunch truck, you'd stop and have your lunch and carry on. You were also given 2 power bars a day, and then at night, and you were given breakfast and dinner. What you had to do yourself was pitch your tents, take care of yourself. There were also 2 mechanics and 2 doctors on the ride with us, and there was always a sweep at the back. So we were well taken care of, and we had we had places to go. We had recourse. You had to keep all your stuff in a locker on the great giant trucks. And if you were sick that day, you could ride in the truck. So we were very, very well supported. I mean, that was excellent. Every day was a stage, and we'd usually do about 5 days, and then there would be a rest day. I think our longest time without any rest day was 8 days, and that was extremely difficult. Water was scarce. There was always enough water to drink, and there was always water to wash your hands, but there was, especially at the beginning of the trip, there was no water to wash in. So it was wet wipes and stinking. And one of the big challenges was to keep yourself clean and hygienic. Because as you can imagine, if you're cycling an average of 84 miles a day in very hot temperatures, or in the rainy season in East Africa, it's difficult to keep clean. It's difficult to keep on top of sores, saddle sores, any cuts, mosquito bites, and so on. So every day we'd set out, we'd have breakfast, and we'd set out usually just as the sun was rising, and off we'd go. We all had timers, so you were timed. And then some of us took our timers off and became challenge riders or expedition riders. It split really into, by the end of the trip, a lot of people were just cycling alone or in very small groups, because as you went over the rough country, inevitably you spread out. So I spent a lot of time cycling on my own or with my kind of cycling buddy, Mike from Germany, who I will always love because we had so many incredible conversations. So that was it. And the stages, we basically went through 10 countries in Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And each country had its own special characteristics. We entered Tanzania in the rainy season, so we were thigh deep in red mud. We cycled through Namibia, those beautiful red dunes and the grasslands. We saw wild giraffe and antelope in the north of Kenya. We were also attacked by armed bandits. We suffered from malaria, from typhoid. The chef got typhoid in the camp. That was a disaster. one of my friends was bitten by a dog and had to have all the rabies injections. I mean, there were lots of adventures. And I did write a book about it called Dodging Elephants, because I did have an encounter with an elephant.
I was just going to say, you wrote your first book called Dodging Elephants. Do you just want to dodge how you ended up dodging elephants or being charged by wild elephants?
I think you need to read the book.
Oh, okay.
But basically, no, I can tell you. I'll tell you the start of the story.
Okay.
So we were very close to the border with Zambia. we were Zambia and Botswana, and in that area there's a lot of wildlife. And so I was cycling along. It was early morning. I actually had some friends that come to join me for that leg. So we're all cycling along, and then there was a shout. We were all strung along like, pearls on a string. And there was a shout from up ahead, elephants ahead. Now, I was brought up in East Africa where I was brought up above a game park. So I know how dangerous elephants are. Wild African elephants will charge. They can trample cars. They can travel at 50 kilometers an hour. And they're very territorial. So, I'm frightened of elephants in the wild. I know what they're wild animals. They're unlikely to be impressed by a group of people in bright yellow clothing or, bright lycra cycling along the road. So I stopped. I thought, I'll let the elephant pass. And then read the book to find out more.
Oh, I love that. Amazing.
Is that terrible? Do you
No. That's not terrible at all, because I want to read the book as well. So I almost want to find out for myself. Let's go to Cape Town. So you set off on January 9th from Cairo, riding through 10 countries, 12,500 kilometers over 100 days with 20 rest days, and you finish in Cape Town. That's a life-changing experience, bearing in mind what you've been through the previous year. Were you coming to any decisions during that ride? Did you make any further decisions about your life and what you wanted to do? And what almost sort of happened during and after with regards to the next stage of your life?
Sarah, that is an excellent question. And you would think, wouldn't you, with all that time, I would have thought out my life plan. Honestly, I swear to God, I was sure. I thought by the end of this 4 months, I will be sorted. I will know where I'm going. I will be ready for the next step. Don't ask me why, but for whatever reason, I did not think about anything. My mind was almost like I wiped my hard drive. I spent all that time and nothing was in my mind except for that day. Was it too hot? Was it too cold? How were my legs feeling? Was it time for my snack? Should I go to the bathroom now before we get to camp? Oh, who's ahead of me? I'm going to catch them. I'm going to catch them. I'm going to catch them. I literally lived in the moment for 4 months, which actually is one of the great joys of adventuring. But unfortunately, when it stops, you enter this kind of depression. And I came off the ride. I left behind my TDA family who I'd got so close to, 4 months of sharing this experience with these amazing, wonderful people who I'd kind of fallen in love with all of them. And then suddenly I'm on my own back in the Peak District without a job and just freaking out and missing my life, missing being outdoors, missing being on the bike. It was a disaster.
How did you deal with that?
I ate a lot. I got very fat. You just have to go through it. And actually now I'm more accustomed to having these amazing projects which do come to an end. So it's you just have to gird yourself up a little bit that life is going to feel flat and that you are going to have lost your immediate sense of purpose and have to find a new one or go within yourself to find things to accomplish that will make you feel better.
I'm looking on your website now, I may be wrong, but was your next adventure the Marathon Des Sables in 2014?
Yes, it was.
So what happened in that 3-year interim?
Well, I tried to find a normal job. So I took up a job with the BBC, but I found really that it wasn't any longer for me. So I did that for a year and it was amazing. I traveled all over the world. I was doing a mentorship program for journalists across 18 countries in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. So the travel was incredible, meeting these wonderful journalists and seeing them work in countries where they were truly oppressed and faced a lot of dangers was extremely inspirational. But working full time and, being back, having to fill out forms and EU bids and so on, it didn't work for me anymore. So I started to transition into finding different things to do. And I started and failed at different things. I set up a running camp company with a friend of mine who runs a travel company in Morocco called Epic Travel, and we were going to do running camps in Morocco, and we spent a lot of time doing it. Didn't work. I worked as a consultant, and then I signed up for the Marathon Des Sables and made that my next goal.
How did that go?
Well, I signed up for Marathon Des Sables never having run a marathon and being a horrible runner, which I remain to this day. I am a horrible runner. But by signing up for something so difficult, I decided to, and I think this is a big step towards becoming, if you like, a professional adventurer. I decided to shape my narrative and shape my life around that challenge. So I started writing about it. I tried to find ways to fund it, tried to fundraise for it, from corporates. And I moved to Morocco, which again, I didn't know was going to have such a huge impact on my life, to train. So that was the beginning of me forming this kind of whole life around doing different adventures and projects.
Oh, that's fantastic. And is that when you started your blog, alicemorrison.co.uk?
I started that for Tour d'Afrique, but I got serious about it for the Marathon des Sables.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So you actually loved Morocco so much that you ended up staying there, didn't you? And you do speak Arabic. Actually, can you clarify, what language do you speak? So I've got Arabic, Turkish, English, bit of dodgy French.
French, a bit of German, some Tashlahit, which is one of the Berber languages. And then I always learn, whatever country I go to, I learn at least 10 or 20 words, or sometimes more, so that I can do all the greetings, thank you, goodbye. So I've got like smatterings of Georgian, Amharic, Russian, all sorts, but they're only smatterings.
Got you. Amazing. So 2015, that was an exciting year for you, because you ended up doing your first world first. Do you want to share more about that and where the idea came from?
Yes, again, it's kind of weird being an adventurer, because obviously lots of people do fantastic things, and I'm not athletic enough, sporty enough to do things which are, I'm never going to be a world champion. So I'm always looking for things that are a bit different. And I'm also trying to, obviously as a woman, I have a different experience to male adventurers. And I'm always trying to do things which are about not only the physical effort, which is always there, but really about exploring the culture and sharing that experience with other people. Because for me, half of the joy is the communication of these experiences, because I'm seeing things that not everyone is able to see or indeed wants to see. But a lot of people do like to hear about them or read about them. So that's part of it.
So just talking more about your world first.
So my first world first, the Atlas to Atlantic. I was sitting talking to my friend Charlie, with whom I'd run the Marathon Des Sables, who owns Epic Travel. And I said, Charlie, I want to do something. I need to do a world first. What do you think? What have we got in Morocco that we can do? And he said, well, I don't think anyone's gone from the top of Toubkal, highest point in North Africa, to sea level, straight across the Atlas Mountains. It's doable. I will sponsor you. So I was sponsored by Epic Travel, which was great. And, just go and do it, because it won't take too long. It's 350 kilometers, and it's doable, but it is a world first, and it will be tough because you'll be going across the Atlas Mountains, straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. So it was a confluence of doing something in Morocco, which I adore, and it being practical. I could do it. I had funding for it, and it was a world first. So that's why I decided to do it.
And how did it go?
It was so much harder than I thought it would be. It was so incredibly difficult, and I had not foreseen this at all. In fact, this is a bit of a theme, because of course I hadn't done any training, but I thought, I'm pretty fit, I could do a bit of hiking, it'd be fine. It's not biking's harder. Anyway, so the first day, one of the difficulties was it was starting from the top of Mount Toubkal, which is 4,167 meters. It's the highest peak in North Africa, 3 times the size of Ben Nevis. But it was stopping from the top. So we had to get to the top. And since couldn't afford a helicopter, we had to walk. So my day started at 4 a.m. We got to the summit, and then that was the beginning of the adventure. And the day finished at 11 p.m. at night, by which time we'd climbed another 3,500 meter summit and covered, I think it was around about 20 kilometers to get to our first stopping point. And we didn't get there till, as I say, 11 at night. My torch had faded out. We were going on an iPhone torch, which is ridiculous. And my legs had swollen and stiffened so incredibly badly that my boots, which I'd worn for 5 years, no longer fitted. And I kept falling. I kept slipping and falling on the descents, because my legs were so exhausted, I hadn't factored in certain crucial, so I'm not a very good adventurer, facets. Like I was carrying all my own kits. I was carrying a tent, a sleeping bag. So my backpack was really heavy, puts more pressure on your legs and feet. It was August, so July, August. So it was actually incredibly hot and my feet swelled. And that first day was just torture. It really was. By the end of it, I was just not on my knees. If I could have crawled the last kilometre, I would have. But we got into our hostel. We were staying at a little hostel, Ajit. They'd saved some supper for us. We ate supper, went to bed. Me and my guide, Rashid Ait al-Mahjoub, an Amazigh guide, Berber guide, who did this with me. And I just thought, well, just look, take your ibuprofen. Don't just take your clothes off. They had a shower. It was cold, but they had a shower. Have a shower, go to bed. We'll get up in the morning and the next day we'll start again. And that's what I did and got through it. But by day 4, I could no longer wear my boots at all. I was really worried. My feet were just bleeding so badly. But Rashid had a spare pair of Brooks trainers, which were about 20 years old with him. And they were big and they had holes in them. So I did the rest of the trek in holy trainers with absolutely no tread up and down and over the Atlas Mountains, because it was the only thing I could wear that my feet weren't just in agony in.
Oh, painful feet is the absolute, or not the absolute worst, but one of the worst things, especially when you're hiking and carrying everything. Mentally, how did you get through that? Because that's seriously tough going, not only physically, but mentally on the mind.
The mental thing's always the hardest thing. And I was with Rashid. So, I had my companion. We talked about everything, about his life as a young Amazigh Berber man, what he was hoping to do. I learned some of my first steps towards the Berber language, Tashlahit. We'd look at things on the way, all the little bits of wildlife we'd see, the lizards, little foxes, squirrels, the beautiful landscapes. So I tried to distract myself with the enjoyment of the moment, even though my feet hurt. There was lots to enjoy. And then really, I just took it minute by minute. I didn't really think ahead. And then in the back of my mind as well, there was, fear of failure, because I fear failure. I didn't want to stop and just have failed on this mission. And I had a sponsor and I couldn't really let them down. So I just persevered. I think the whole thing, and you'll find this in every part of life. I don't think this is just about adventure. Don't look too far ahead. Just concentrate on this step, the next step, and you will get there.
Yeah. I'd love to know sort of culturally, how did it work being a female in Morocco, having a male guide, Rashid, and also people when they met you, because you're probably going through very remote villages. They may never have seen a white woman before. Culturally, how was that side of things?
So one of the things I enjoy the most about adventuring is getting to meet all the different people. And my rule of thumb is just be open and friendly and listen as hard as you can and be as respectful as you can and ask questions so that you don't make giant boo-boos. For me as a woman, Rashid is, a dear friend, and we still see each other all the time, and he's extremely respectful. So he did some very culturally sensitive things that I didn't appreciate at the time. Because obviously I'm used to, if I'm with a guide or whatever, we just share a room because, if you're in a hut somewhere, or a tent, it's no problem. But when we stayed in people's homes, we'd find a tiny village high up in the Atlas. They'd all come zooming out to meet us. As you say, quite often I was the first Western woman they'd actually seen in real life as opposed to on TV. They'd invite us to stay. And what would happen was I'd usually sleep in the sitting room, and then Rashid would sleep on the roof. And he'd say, I'll sleep on the roof, it's too hot. And what I didn't realize is that culturally, it was completely inappropriate for him to sleep in the same room as me, even though I'm old enough to be his mother, because he's very young and I'm in my 50s. But I didn't realize. So he would be very sensitive to all of that. Very important to wear the right clothes. It's not about your freedom and your rights. It's about respecting other people's rights. And people here don't want to see naked arms, naked legs. So shorts and short sleeve shirts are out, really. It's long sleeves and trousers. And then just watch and learn. I learned some things before I left. So, for example, how do you eat a shared tagine? The lovely Moroccan dish with the pointy lidded pot, because people eat communally here. They don't have individual plates. So what's good manners? How do you eat properly? Don't go out of your lane. Don't take other people's bits of food. Make sure you don't touch any meat that there is, because the host will take that meat out and divide it at the end of the meal so that everybody gets the much needed protein, which is expensive. So it's just things like that. I think keeping your ears open and asking questions to avoid problems, and I asked Rashid, just tell me if something's not right or if I've done something wrong, and then I can do it right next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Powerful stuff. What do you think you learnt most about doing that expedition?
I fell in love even more with the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. And again, I would urge anyone who's not been to come visit, because they are just so stunning. It's very physically difficult terrain. It's very rough underfoot and slippy and dangerous, but there's something about it, the blue sky, and then they're great, these huge barren mountains, and then you'll come across a tiny farm which supports 2 families, nestled and terraced, where there's a tiny bit of water with walnut trees and carrots and courgettes and some sheep and goats and a cow, and a lovely friendly family who will welcome you in there. So I learned about the sheer joy and beauty of these mountains, and also the incredible hospitality of the Amazigh people, the Berber people.
And had you also sort of made some firmer decisions with regards to your life and what you wanted to do and how you wanted to live it?
I think I've been in denial quite. I believe denial is a very useful tool for anybody. So it wasn't about making firm decisions to go on this path. It was more about trying to listen to what I really enjoyed and wanted to do, earning enough money to support myself, and then following opportunities as I was given them. And that's what I've done. So my transition wasn't like, I'm going to stop being a chief executive and become a full-time adventurer. That would have been a massive leap. It was more like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And as you follow a path, your future, if you like, is revealed to you. In Arabic, in Islam, they say everything is maktub, it's written. And although I believe you also have to try pretty hard to get what's coming for you, you have to strive and you have to endeavor and you have to give your best efforts. There is a part of me that does feel that there are paths in front of us, and if you tread them, you will get to your destination. Was
it challenging for you after leading this almost very society acceptable, because you've been a CEO, you ran a big company, you'd had the job and everything that comes along with that, the status and the money, and then obviously things changed, and I think people can accept sort of the first heading off to Africa to do the big cycle ride. It's just that's a one-off, and then 3 years sort of pass and did MDS, and you're moving to Morocco, and then slowly but surely you end up doing a world first, and then starting to call yourself an adventurer, and I'm doing that in the inverted air quotes. What are friends and family thinking at this point? Not necessarily do you care, but were they supportive? Did they understand the direction that you were going in?
I think it's a bit mixed. And actually, you make a very good point. I found my initial loss of status and income, but definitely status, extremely difficult, because it's easy if you say to someone, "Oh, I'm a CEO and I mountain bike at the weekends and I do have a home in the Peak District," they can kind of relate to you. But if you're doing this wishy-washy, wibbly-wobbly thing, and that's like, "Oh, I do a bit of writing and I try to find adventures and do them," it doesn't make sense to people. And whereas before they could pigeonhole you and understand you, and that made life easier for both you and them. Now I was doing things that people don't really understand, and in fact, quite often I don't understand. And I had to redefine my status, not only for other people, but also for myself, because for me personally, it's extremely important to be proud of myself, to feel that I have some worth as a human being, and that I'm doing things that I can look back on with satisfaction, and that I can involve myself in with a clear conscience and with the belief that I'm doing something that has a meaning. I don't have the traditional things that most women have. I don't have a husband. I don't have children. I don't have a proper job. So it's been very important to me to become this person, to become an adventurer, but also to be able to stand up and explain to people what I do and say the reasons that I'm doing it. And to you, I would say the reason that I love being an adventurer, and I think what I can contribute to other people, if anything, is to work with people who want to do things. So, for example, I just worked with Jean-Pierre Dachary from Dardaïf and Education for All to take a group of 22 young Moroccan girls up Toubkal for the first time. They just finished their baccalaureate and succeeded. And these are young women from the mountains who are first generation literate. They've just got their degrees, so they can go to university. And so we took them up Mount Toubkal, which they would never do on their own culturally. So I can do things like that. But the more importantly for me, it's about trying to communicate between different people and to share our humanity. So I can go to a tiny Berber village where the language, the religion, the culture is completely different, and I can find absolute shared interests, shared morals, and shared ways of living that I can then communicate back. And in a world where there's so much division and so much strife, where people keep putting labels on themselves to be separate, we're Brexiteers, we want independence. We hate Trump. We hate this. We hate that. And, we hate Muslims because they're terrorists. I don't believe that. Of course, it's absolute nonsense. But people are so keen to put labels on themselves. I'm a Shia. I'm a Sunni. I'm a Christian. I'm a Jew. What I'm very interested in and what I like to do is to show how much we have in common. And humans have so much more in common than they have differences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I'd love to discuss as well is the financial side of things, especially being an adventurer and trying to earn money and going from, and I did it myself, going from a well-paid job in finance, having this regular income coming in, having enough disposable income, paying for my own flat, going on holidays, never having to look what the prices were in restaurants or in shops or anything. It was just a case of, I can just afford it. Whereas making that transition for me involved me moving back home with my parents, which I'm sure everybody who listens to the podcast has heard far too much about. But it's really, really tough to try and make this, to make money, to make enough money for me to actually be able to live. I'm still not there, but I do have enough to go off and to travel, for example, to do different challenges and then come home because I've got this base. I've also got my brother who lives over in Australia. So if I'm ever in Australia, I've got, free accommodation, free food, free drink, all of that sort of stuff, which I'd just be really interested from your perspective as an adventurer, how you're earning a living, how are you affording your lifestyle, how have you made it work for you?
It's a really good question. It's really important for people to know this. So for a start, I'm obviously older than you. So I've been working for a long time. I had savings and I also had bought a couple of houses. So that was one thing. I had a backstop. And if you like, I thought that I'd taken care of my future, touch wood. So because I had these houses, I can have rent instead of a pension. I don't really have a big pension. So I need money to live in the now and to do my expeditions. Living in the now, I make money through writing articles. I also worked for other people. So I was the editor of Run Ultra. I do social media for other people, for a couple of companies here. And I write as a journalist, so I earn some money from that. But it's not very much. So I always have a backstop of my rents coming in. And that meant some things. So, for example, my house in the Peak District, ideally, I would love to be able to go back more often and spend more time there. But I can't because I have to rent it out so that I can afford to live. One of the reasons for staying in Morocco, it's much cheaper to live here. That's just a fact. And when I first came, I also had to do the same as you, slightly different, but going from a beautiful house in the Peak District of my own, all decorated in my own style and with, a study and 2 sitting rooms and a gorgeous kitchen and a view of Kinder Scout. I then had to go to sharing a flat in Marrakesh with like an American aid worker. And I was dreading that. I thought, I don't want to share a flat anymore. I'm not a student anymore. I haven't done this for years. But actually, it was one of the best things that ever happened. So you cut your cloth. And yes, now I have to look at everything. So before, I would always take a taxi. If I wanted to take a taxi, I'd go out for a meal. Now I don't do any of those things. I watch the pennies. I live very simply and very cheaply. And I put my money that I earn into my expeditions. And what's been fantastic for me, and I'm incredibly grateful to all those who supported me on this journey, is that I think as a result of becoming a little bit more well-known, having a TV program, the Morocco to Timbuktu series on BBC Two, having my third book just come out, I've actually now got corporate sponsors. And my main corporate sponsor is Craghoppers, the hiking apparel company, who are just so supportive. So they give me some money, which funded my last expedition, but they also give me kits and they help me, you know, they keep in contact. They kind of look after my welfare a bit, and we're in constant communication, and they ask me to write for them. And I love that, because money is very important. You have to earn enough, but also losing your kind of your network of work, of being in a company, is quite difficult. So I am very grateful to the sponsors I have, like Craghoppers. I have a corporate sponsor called NTT Data UK, and they likewise are incredibly supportive. And I go and talk to them. I do women's business breakfasts for them and that kind of thing. So I earn my money through writing, TV, public speaking. That's a very good way to earn money. And then I do work for other people. I'm kind of a pen for hire. I blog for other people. I do social media for other people. And I have the backstop of my rents coming in. So those are my sources of income.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that, because it's one of the things that I've been trying to do on the podcast, because a lot of the time, the two obstacles that people talk about is, look, I don't have the time and I don't have the money. And I think it's incredibly powerful when people can share and say, look, this is how I do it. This is what's working for me. And I think it's really amazing to hear that. You must be really busy. Like, I was trying to think of all the different things that you'll be doing. Do you have a typical day or a typical week of what your life is like?
I don't have that at all. And actually, I like not having that, because I'm not made that way. I find routine very restrictive, but at the same time, I miss routine, and I fall into terrible habits. You know, just don't talk to me about binge watching The Bachelorette on the internet. So no, I don't. I mean, this morning I'm actually been a bit under the weather. I think my body's broken down a little bit, because I've been going nonstop since November. So I've kind of got an ear infection and I've got a sty. I'm so unglamorous. I'm all kind of swollen up and red-eyed. But today I'm finishing off some TV ideas for a Glasgow-based production company. So hopefully keep your fingers crossed for me. I've got to write an article about the dry expedition, which I just finished for a magazine. And that's my day to day. I've also just been painting a table for my terrace, and I've just I live in a tiny village in the Atlas Mountains, and my neighbours are Amazigh Berbers, and they've just come in to have a wee chat. So that's my morning so far. I'll have to cook something because there's no fast food here, so everything's from scratch, and that will be my day. So today it will be work, a bit of neighbours, a bit of kind of house upkeep, and that's my day. Because I don't feel very well, I'm not going to go out and do anything physical, and it's also incredibly hot at the moment, but normally I would try and do something physical as well.
Do you want to take us back to talk through what you've done since November, because you've done some pretty epic challenges?
I have. I seem to have I almost lit a rocket under myself and zipped off. So the background to this is, in 2018 I finished off another book, and I had let myself go. I had got, honestly, I'm so terrible. I just binge in the fridge. So I'd got really fat, really unfit. I was running, but I was doing 5K and thinking I was a hero slowly. And I thought, I've got to break this. I need a challenge. I've spent too much time. I'd spent a lot of time working in 2018, earning money and catching up with things. I was like, right, I'm going to sign up for something I can't do. I know. I'll sign up for this ultra marathon called the Everest Trail Race, which is 160 kilometers around Everest. So you're at altitude, and it's 16,000 meters of positive ascent, which is basically like climbing a 10-mile ladder straight up. And that was in 6 days. So I signed up for this challenge, which was insane, the Everest Trail Race. And then I had to train for it. So I moved from my house on the coast at Essaouira at the beach, which was lovely. I loved it there. It was all relaxing, into the mountains, and started training. I did the race in November. And again, this was like a super cool challenge, because it was so difficult. It was just ascending all the time, steep, up, 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 up for hours and hours and hours and hours, with cutoff points because it's a race. But I did it. I took all my mental energy to do that race. It took my whole physical energy as well. But mentally, I just had to keep on myself every minute. Do you know, for 6 days, my only thoughts were, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. Run the downs, run the flats, don't stop, run the downs, run the flats. I said that to myself for 6 days. And I literally stopped for about 4 photos and that was it.
Yeah. I mean, altitude, physically tough, big challenge. I think I would have flipped it to like keep going, because it would have been more positive than don't stop. Because I think I just hear the word stop over in my head and just be like, oh, maybe I should just stop. But you did keep on going. What was the highlight from that race? What was that magical moment that stood out for you?
Do you know, this is going to
the
sound
finish line.
Awful. No, it wasn't the finish line. I thought it would be the finish line because with Marathon Des Sables, it definitely was. I think the magical moment for me on that race came afterwards when I'd kind of seen through the exhaustion and I knew I was done. But there was one very beautiful kind of heart-stopping moment. It was the first moment I saw Everest. We were running. I was actually running as well, or jogging, along a kind of flattish, I use the term loosely, section. And then there was a shrine on the corner, a little temple, a Buddhist temple with the prayer flags fluttering, white, blue, yellow, I think, red from memory, fluttering in the breeze. And behind them was the snow-covered slopes of Everest. And the sky was so blue and the snow was so white and the prayer flags were fluttering ahead of me. And that was one of those moments where you just are flooded with the joy of life.
Oh, that sounds incredible. I mean, amazing. Yeah, I can't even imagine seeing Everest and everything else around it. Just absolutely beautiful. And then also crossing the finish line. What happened after that? Because you then went on to do another challenge in March 2019 with not much break, sort of doing when you became the first woman. Well, I'll let you what did you do in March?
Well, you're right. I didn't have a break. So actually, this challenge was another world first. I became the first woman ever to walk the Dra River, 1,500 kilometers in Morocco from source to sea. And it took 3 months. It was January, February, March. So I basically came off Everest, recovered from my hideous chest infection, the Himalaya hack, and then started my expedition at the very beginning of January. And that's been such an incredible experience. So it was me, 5 camels, Callum, Hamish, Alistair, Murdo, and Sausage, and my 3 guides, Brahim, and Addi. And we set off and we walked the whole length of this. We didn't follow the exact course of the river, but we walked the length of the river together. We walked through the mountains, we walked through the desert, we walked through the oases, and we finally reached the ocean. And it was one of the most extraordinary experiences in a life full of extraordinary experiences.
How did that come about?
That was I was looking at the map of Morocco. And again, I was thinking, I want to do something in Morocco. And I just was looking at the map and I thought, oh, the Dra River, that's a good length. That's a good length, I thought to myself. I don't think I knew a man had done it. He'd written a book about it, but I don't think any woman had done it. I shall trot off and see if I can do that. And what attracted me was that it went through lots of different environments and it was enough time to really get my feet into the soil.
Yeah. What do you think you learnt most about doing that expedition? Or was it more routine now because you've been on so many expeditions? Was it just a case of not going through the motions, but sort of like, yeah, let's get this done now?
No, not at all. The opposite. It almost felt like my first proper expedition in many ways because it was a big deal. You know, we had to get reprovisioned. There were, the route was difficult. We sometimes had to change route because there was army exercises or we were getting too close to the Algerian border, which is closed. There was extreme weather conditions to deal with, heat at the end and very extreme cold at the beginning. My hands all split and started bleeding because it was so cold in the mountains. There wasn't enough water. We had to walk from well to well. And we got to situations where I was like, well, we've only got enough water now for half a day. So it felt extremely different in that way. There's a massive difference between doing something like that and doing something which is fully supported like TDA, where you've got a truck that you can always go to and, water will be provided. But I think one of the things I truly took away from this expedition, and again, this speaks to what I believe about our common humanity, is I was nervous before I went. I was going with 3 Amazigh Berber guides. I'd been told they were very devout Muslims, 3 men for 3 months. None of them spoke English. So it was going to be Arabic and Turkish to communicate in. And I just thought I would be lonely. I thought I would miss my own kind. That's the truth. Not because I don't love Morocco and the Amazigh and Arab people who live here, but because, just it's human nature. There wouldn't be any women. There wouldn't be anyone my age. There wouldn't be anyone my religion. I would just be different. I'd be the odd one out. These men have become amongst my dearest friends. We shared the adventure together. I spent 3 months speaking only Arabic and Tashlahit. We spent the evening telling riddles, playing cards, telling jokes. We spent each day sharing the adventure together. And that has just confirmed for me how beautiful the human race is and how kind people are and how if you just give everyone a chance, how easy it is to get along with people. So that is what I truly learned.
So you completed that challenge, which is absolutely incredible. And then you haven't stopped because you then released a book, My 1001 Nights, Tales and Adventures from Morocco. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yes. And thank you for the plug. So I wrote my 1001 Nights after I'd been in Morocco for 1001 Nights. And it's based on this idea of stories, because I don't know if you know the original 1001 Nights, but it was about a sultan married a virgin and killed her every day at dawn. And then he married the daughter of the wazir. And in order to keep alive, she told the story every night with a cliffhanger. And she told 1001 stories, which are now very famous. So that was the reason I wrote the book in that way. And what I wanted to do is share my experiences of being in Morocco. And it's every kind of experience. It's like, how do you deal with the taxi driver when he asks you if you're a virgin?
Wow.
How do you barter? The answer is, yes, of course I am. I'm not married. I think you'll find. Uh-huh. How do you barter for a carpet? How do you... let me think of other ones. All the adventures I've done. So all the world first is in there. The adventures in the desert, running across the desert, and how the Marathon Des Sables for me was actually like being an ancient trader or a caravan of old, because I shared that extreme connection with the sheer physical hell that is traveling through sand at very high temperatures. So it's all these kind of tales and adventures from this country that I've come to love. And because I live here and have done for so long, and so many people visit, what I hope to do is give them a little glimpse under the skin of Morocco and a few hints and tips for traveling. But more than that, it's just to share some of the really fun things that have happened, like the time a policeman stopped me for speeding and then gave me a melon.
Oh. Very random. I was going to say, I love it when you open your book up on Amazon and inside the prologue, it's like, oh no, said my mum when I told her that the title of my book, you can't call it that. People will think it's a porn novel. Many apologies to any of you who've picked up this book hoping for lots of sex. You're about to be sadly disappointed.
I know, it's tragic.
Oh no, it's amazing. That's a great start. You've been on the go a lot without really much of a break, especially since November 2018. Have you got any plans for the rest of the year? Are you taking some time out, or are you planning a bigger adventure in 2020? What's the what's next question, basically?
What's next is really good. And I think this is actually an interesting question for someone who does the things I do, and maybe some of your listeners who want to do these things, because my life is in the hands of other people to some extent. So, for example, at the moment, I'm doing TV ideas and I've just put in a proposal for another book. But whether those two things will come off, I have no power over. So the thing I do have power over is planning my own adventures. So I'd like to do one more thing before the end of the year. Not very big, but I would like to go and perhaps discover a different country. I've got a real yen to go diving and look around Madagascar. So I'm slightly working on that, but it may not come off. I'll do something else before the end of the year. And then really I'm planning now for 2020. And I've got masses of ideas in the offing. It slightly depends if any of my work things come off, but I will do an expedition regardless. And I think at the moment I'm veering towards actually becoming the first person to walk the length of Morocco and joining up, doing the north and then doing the south and joining up my dry expedition so that I could do that. So that's kind of what I'm exploring at the moment. But I mean, I'll be interested to know if people would think that would be too boring, too much Morocco. I don't think it will be, because the north is all mountains and history. And then the south is like straight into Africa, straight into the Sahara. So that's kind of the plan. What do you think, Sarah?
I think it sounds amazing. And also, I like, I don't know what this is called, but, you know, like, because your name's like Alice Morrison, and so Morocco, it's like the M's, and so you're almost becoming like, not I was going to say the Queen of Morocco, but, you know, you're doing so many challenges in that area. So I'm always like, go for it. Go for it, go for it, go for it.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's the kind of thing you struggle with. You like, oh my goodness, are people going to be bored of hearing about this? Should I do something new, or do they like the depth that I can get to? Because the more I do this, the more I learn, and the more I can tell people about things that are much deeper and much less on the surface. So that's what I like. But, you know, you have to think, oh, are people fed up?
I almost think, and this is difficult to say, but I almost think it's almost sometimes it's not about other people. It's about, do you enjoy it? Will you enjoy going into more depth? Are you going to learn something from it? Is that going to help you to grow and develop as a person? Is it something, you know, deep down that excites you and you think, oh yes, I want to do this research. I want to figure this out and work out like this plan. And then if it is, go for it, because there will be other people. If you're passionate and interested about it, I think there's nothing worse when you're doing something and you're only sort of like 50% in, but you're doing it because other people are expecting you to do it. And I always think with what I do, I think, look, would I do this even if I didn't have people watching me or supporting me or following me? And the answer, I always like, yeah, because I want to do it. and obviously I hope other people enjoy the journey as well. But I sometimes try and forget that, but it's a difficult balancing act. I think when you're writing books and sharing about it and blogging and doing everything else, because you also do want to make sure people are interested. But I think you'll be able to make it interesting. You would definitely make it interesting.
Oh, I love that. I am going to clip that part and put it on my desktop and listen to it. You are absolutely right. It is about, what is the point of choosing this life unless you really follow your own instinct and do what you love. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, you are welcome. Right, Alice, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Go. I'm ready.
Okay,
yeah.
So my questions may be quick, but your answers don't have to be. Okay, are you a morning or evening person?
Morning.
What time do you set your alarm?
I don't need one. My cat wakes me up at 10 to 7 every morning by patting my face.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to wake up. Are you tea or coffee?
Coffee first thing, tea after that. Rooibos tea.
Rooibos tea, very nice. Oh, and actually the coffee, I mean, I don't drink coffee, by the way, but I have heard the coffee in Morocco is meant to be incredible as well. Is that true?
Yeah.
You can say no.
Actually, no, I think Ethiopian coffee is the best coffee in the world.
Okay, I love it. Are you currently reading a book at the moment?
I am.
Do you know what it's called?
I can never ever remember the titles of what I'm reading. That's awful. Oh, Ordinary People.
Ordinary People. Who's the author of that? The author. Oh, don't worry. We'll leave it at that. Ordinary People. What about movies? Do you have a favourite movie or film that you like to watch?
I love the movies, and I'm actually a member of the BAFTA, the Film Academy. So I am one of the many people that helps judge for the awards. So my favorite movie is just basically the movie that I liked most that year. I'm a bit of a tart in that way. So I'm just trying desperately. There's a few movies in the last 10 years that I've really, really loved. And one of them that springs to mind is Mystic River. I adored that film. I loved Roma from last year. It was fantastic. And I just go for the things that get me. I loved Free Solo, about the climb. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one, but I've heard a lot about Free Solo.
Oh, it's amazing. And also one of the best films I have ever seen. It's a Japanese animation. Don't even ask me. I don't even like animation. It's called Island Dogs. It is brilliant.
So does that mean you get to go to the BAFTAs every year if you wanted to?
I have been several times, and yes, I can go every year if I wanted to, and if I had enough money, which I don't.
Oh, so you have to pay for a ticket? You don't get it free?
You have to pay for a ticket, and believe you me, it's expensive.
But that's very cool, though. Very cool. What about music? Do you a particular type of music, particular songs that you like listening to?
I'm not one of those people that has music on all the time at all, because when I'm working, I just have to have silence because I have to concentrate. I like all kinds of music. And in Morocco, I love listening to hit radio, or as they call it here, hit radio, 100% hits. And they broadcast in a mixture of Arabic, Berber, English and French and Spanish. And they have songs, it's like pure pop. So, it's Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga, and then the pop equivalents in Morocco or in Algeria, and I love it.
Well, that sounds amazing. Are you a mountain or a beach person?
Mountain.
Ooh. What about kit or gear? Do you have a favorite piece of kit or gear?
Well, as I already mentioned, I'm an ambassador for Craghoppers, and I genuinely love their stuff because it's incredibly hard wearing. It really is. I wore the same trousers, 2 pairs of trousers and 2 shirts for like 3 months, 3 shirts for 3 months doing the drag. Can you believe it? I stank. But my favorite piece of kit is my Ventilite Craghoppers down jacket, which is in burnt orange. I wore this every single day. In fact, I've probably worn this in the last 6 months, every single day for about 4 months. It is super light, super warm. It washes brilliantly. And because in Morocco, I'm more often cold than I'm hot. I live in the mountains and it gets really cold here. And when we're doing our dry expedition, it's freezing in the desert at night. And it was obscenely freezing in the mountains of Drought where we started. So honestly, that jacket, I love it. It's getting a bit manky, but I love it.
And do you know what I love? I love companies who actually sponsor women and make them their ambassadors and support them, because all too often it just doesn't happen. And I think we as consumers do have the power of where we spend our money. And I think we've almost got to look more carefully at companies and think, well, hold on, who's helping to represent women? Who's helping to promote women? Who's supporting women? And then actually go and support those companies. So I'm going to make sure I put a plug of them in the show notes as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. It's really important. All too often, companies only support, they support beautiful young men.
With beards and biceps. Two final things. So one, Alice, where can people find more information about you? Where can they buy your books and follow along with your adventures?
So I have a website, alicemorrison.co.uk, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Alice Out There One, Facebook, Alice Hunter Morrison Adventures. My book is on Amazon and it's in all good bookshops, including Waterstones and Stanford's, My 1001 Nights. In fact, all my books are on there and all my books are on Amazon. So go for it.
Awesome. I'll make sure I put all of the links to your different books in the show notes as well. And finally, Alice, final words of wisdom that you want to leave our listeners with of how they can live a more adventurous life.
First thing is you can do it. If I can run around Everest being an absolutely horrible runner, fat and unfit, but actually just set my mind to it, you can do anything. You are amazing. Put your mind to something, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be big. It can be big, and you just go for it, because the more you put yourself out your comfort zone, the better you feel.
Absolutely. Alice, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more of your story. Absolute inspiration. I love the different adventures and challenges that you've done. I love how you share it as well. Absolutely inspiring. I can't wait to read more of your books and follow along with the next challenge.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Tribe, thank you so much for listening to that episode with Alice. What an absolute inspiration. Everything that we've talked about today and all the links to Alice's books will be available on the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. If you go and check out toughgirlchallenges.com, you can also find more information about me, my background, the different books that I've written, more information about the previous podcast guests that we've had. There's currently over 200 episodes. That's over 200 hours of content that you can go back and listen to. So please do go and check it out, toughgirlchallenges.com. If you'd like to support the podcast and the work that I do, then please sign up as a patron. Please visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. All of those links are also on my social media channels as well. They're on Instagram. The link is on Twitter. It's also on my website. So that's patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Basically, just ask yourself this question. Have you been motivated by Tough Girl Podcast? If the answer is yes, then please consider signing up as a patron. Have you been inspired by the Tough Girl Podcast? And the answer is yes, then please consider signing up as a patron. Has the Tough Girl Podcast changed your life in some way? If the answer is yes, yes, then please sign up as a patron. If you listen more than once a month, then please consider signing up as a patron. Pay it forward. $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. It really does make a massive amount of difference. Have an incredible day wherever you are, whatever you are doing. Give it your all, give it 110%. Take that first step. Do it now. Do it today. And I'll be back with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl Podcast. Thank you so much for all your support, and thank you so much for giving me your time and listening to this content. Lots of love. Bye.